Timmy's innocent sobs were cut short as the ruthless Denobulan ambassador Vega pulled the trigger, splattering the boy's blood across the Galactic Council chamber on live video broadcast to the entire galaxy. On Earth, ex-soldier Bobby Jones watched the execution of his only son in shaking rage, his fists clenched white. This was the last straw in a string of the Council's atrocities against humanity. Across the planet, horrified humans screamed for blood and retribution. It had only been 50 years since humans made first contact and joined the galactic community. The Council races, centuries more advanced, sneered at the upstart humans, subjecting them to rampant discrimination and oppression. They thought keeping the lesser humans in line would be easy. But as Earth secretly caught up in technology and power, tensions simmered under the surface, until Timmy's broadcasted execution finally brought it to a boil. World leaders gathered in a secret emergency meeting, their faces somber, but eyes alight with righteous fury. They couldn't take on the Council directly, not yet, but they would make them pay for their heinous crimes, by any means necessary. The decision was made swiftly. A covert suicide squad of elite human soldiers and spies led by Bobby himself would infiltrate the Council and tear it down from within. Humans would prove their worth and take their place among the stars, or die trying. There would be no surrender and no mercy. As he prepped for the mission, loading up on weapons and steeling himself for the bloody path ahead, Bobby made a vow. The Council wants to play God, then let's show them what devils humans can be. They would avenge Timmy and ensure humanity's survival and freedom, no matter the cost. The galaxy would soon learn to fear the wrath of the human race. The Council had no idea what was coming for them. The sleek black ship cut through the void of space, its stealth systems rendering it virtually invisible to the Council's scanners. Inside, Bobby Jones sat in the pilot's seat, his eyes hard as he stared out at the stars. Behind him, his team of elite operatives checked their weapons and gear, preparing for the mission ahead. "Approaching the drop zone," Rocket said from the co-pilot's chair. "Zephyr Prime, dead ahead." Bobby nodded, his grip tightening on the controls. This was it, their chance to strike back at the Council and avenge his son's death. He thought of Timmy's face, forever frozen in that final moment of terror, and felt a surge of rage and perseverance. As they neared the planet, Bobby activated the ship's cloaking device, rendering them completely invisible. They slipped past the Council's defenses undetected and made their way to the surface, landing in a remote area near the outpost. "Gear up," Bobby ordered as they exited the ship. "We go in fast and hard, no mercy." The team nodded, their faces grim as they checked their weapons one final time. They moved out, slipping silently through the shadows towards the outpost's perimeter. Bobby took point, his enhanced senses scanning for any signs of danger. They reached the outpost's walls without incident, and Bobby signaled for Rocket to move up. The demolitions expert placed a series of charges on the wall, and they took cover as the explosives detonated with a muffled thump. They breached the outpost's defenses and made their way inside, moving swiftly through the corridors towards the armory. Bobby hacked the door controls with ease, and they slipped inside, their eyes widening at the sight of the advanced alien weaponry lining the walls. "Jackpot," Rocket breathed, moving to grab a sleek rifle from the nearest rack. Just then, alarms began to blare throughout the complex. They had been detected. "Grab what you can and move out," Bobby ordered. He unslung his own rifle and took up a defensive position at the door as the team scrambled to stuff weapons and gear into their packs. A group of Council guards rounded the corner, opening fire with their energy weapons. The humans dove for cover, returning fire with a mix of their own weapons and the newly acquired alien tech. The air filled with the scream of energy bolts and the sizzle of superheated metal. Rocket took a hit and went down with a cry. Bobby dragged him to safety behind a stack of crates, covering him as the firefight raged around them. He knew they couldn't hold out for long against the superior numbers and firepower of the Council guards. "We need to blow the reactor," Bobby said over the din of battle. "Give them something else to worry about while we make our escape." Rocket nodded weakly, blood seeping from the wound in his side. He pulled a detonator from his belt and tossed it to Bobby. Bobby caught the device and turned to the rest of the team. "Fall back to the ship. I'll set the charges and be right behind you." They nodded and began fighting their way towards the exit, laying down covering fire as they went. Bobby raced through the complex towards the reactor core, dodging enemy fire and cutting down any guards who got in his way. He reached the reactor and quickly set the charges, arming the detonator. He had just turned to make his own escape when a blast of energy seared past his head, missing him by inches. A group of council guards had caught up to him. Bobby returned fire, his rifle spitting death as he backed towards the exit. He could hear the hum of the reactor growing louder as the charges ticked down towards detonation. With a final burst of fire, he cut down the last of the guards and sprinted for the exit. He barely made it out before the charges detonated, the explosion consuming the outpost in a massive fireball. The blast wave knocked Bobby off his feet, but he quickly regained his footing and raced towards the waiting stealth ship. He leaped aboard just as Rocket hit the thrusters, the ship rocketing away from the planet's surface. As they cleared the atmosphere and entered the void of space, Bobby looked back at the mushroom cloud rising from the destroyed outpost. It was a clear message to the Council. Humanity would not go quietly into the night. They would fight, tooth and nail, until their last breath. And with the advanced tech they had just stolen, they finally had a chance to level the playing field. News of the raid spread like wildfire through the subjugated races of the Council's empire. Whispers of rebellion began to stir as the downtrodden masses saw a glimmer of hope in humanity's defiance. If the mighty Council could be challenged by a lesser species like humans, then perhaps they too could rise up and claim their freedom. But even as hope began to bloom, the Council prepared its response. Vega, enraged by the audacity of the humans, vowed to crush this insolent rebellion before it could spread. He summoned his best operative, a merciless hunter known as Zoltar, and gave him a simple mission: track down those responsible for the outpost attack and eliminate them, along with any other humans he could find. As Zoltar began his hunt, Bobby and his team knew they had to keep the pressure on. They couldn't give the Council a chance to regroup and strike back. Even as they licked their wounds and mourned their fallen comrades, they began planning their next move. The stakes had never been higher. Failure was not an option, for if they fell, it would not just be humanity that suffered, but every race that looked to them as their last hope for freedom from the Council's tyranny. The fate of the stars itself hung in the balance, and it would be the humans who decided its future, one way or another. Bobby sat in the cramped cockpit of the stealth ship, his eyes fixed on the swirling storms of Kronos. The gas giant loomed large, its turbulent atmosphere a stark contrast to the sleek Denobulan shipyards in orbit. "There it is," he said, his voice low. "The Council's crown jewel." Rocket whistled. "Those are some big-ass ships. How the hell are we going to take them out?" "We can't do it alone," Bobby replied. He tapped a few commands into the console, opening a secure channel. "Time to call in a favor." The comm crackled to life, and a series of rapid clicks filled the cabin. To most, it would sound like static. But Bobby understood the click language. "Zarn, old friend, we need your help." More clicks, then a pause. Finally, a response. "The Hive remembers its debts, human. What do you require?" Hours later, Bobby and his team stood in a corridor of the shipyard, itchy Denobulan worker uniforms concealing their weapons and explosives. Zarn's multifaceted eyes glinted in the harsh light as he led them deeper into the facility. "Security protocols disabled," the insectoid clicked softly. "You have 1 hour before systems reset." Bobby nodded, then turned to his team. "You know the drill. Plant the charges and get out. No heroics." They split up, moving swiftly through the shipyard. Bobby's hands worked quickly, attaching explosive devices to key structural points. The incomplete warships loomed above, their gleaming hulls a testament to Denobulan engineering. As he planted the final charge, a voice rang out. "Well, well, what have we here?" Bobby spun, coming face to face with Zoltar. The alien's energy weapons hummed ominously. "Hands up, human." Zoltar sneered. Did you really think you could? A burst of weapons fire cut him off. Bobby's team had arrived, laying down suppressing fire. Zoltar dove for cover, his personal shield flickering to life. Go! Bobby shouted, sprinting for the exit. Plasma bolts sizzled past his head as Zoltar's kill team joined the fray. The shipyard erupted into chaos. Bobby's people fought desperately, buying time for their escape. But the Denobulans had numbers on their side. One by one, Bobby watched his team fall. Rocket took a hit to the chest, his final act hurling a grenade at their pursuers. Zarn clicked in agony as a plasma bolt tore through his carapace. Bobby had a clear shot at Zoltar, the alien's shield momentarily down. His finger tightened on the trigger, but he hesitated. The intel Zoltar could provide. In that moment of indecision, Zoltar's shield snapped back on. The alien vanished down a maintenance hatch with a mocking laugh. Alarms blared. They were out of time. Bobby sprinted for the escape shuttle, half carrying the wounded Zarn. His hand shook as he pulled out the detonator. So many of his people were still inside. I'm sorry, he whispered and pressed the button. The shipyard disintegrated in a firestorm of light and heat. Bobby barely got the shuttle clear as the orbital rings tore apart, raining debris onto Kronos below. As they limped away from the inferno, Bobby stared at the destruction. The Denobulan fleet was gone, along with the Council's ability to quickly build more. But the cost! Bobby closed his eyes, seeing the faces of those left behind. In the smoldering wreckage, a figure emerged. Zoltar, battered but alive, glared at the retreating shuttle with pure hatred. The real war, Bobby knew, was just beginning. The destruction of the Denobulan shipyard sent shockwaves through the Council. Vega's response was swift and merciless. A blockade choked off Earth and its colonies, cutting supply lines and trade routes. Denobulan warships loomed in Earth's orbit, their weapons trained on the planet's defenses. Bobby watched from his hidden base as reports flooded in. Food shortages, medicine running low. The Council was squeezing humanity, hoping to starve them into submission. We can't let this stand, Bobby said, banging his hand on the table. We need supplies, and I know just where to get them. He laid out his plan to the team, a raid on the Council's massive supply depot on Tangar 4. It was a suicide mission, but they were out of options. Days later, Bobby led a small strike force to the heavily guarded facility. Rocket and Zarn flanked him as they approached the entrance, disguised as a labor crew. IDs, the guard grunted. Bobby handed over their forged credentials, heart pounding. A tense moment passed before the guard waved them through. Once inside, they moved fast. Bobby signaled and the team sprang into action, overpowering the guards before they could raise the alarm. Zarn's insectoid limbs flew across the computer console, disabling security protocols. We're in, Zarn clicked, but not for long. They raced through the cavernous depot, grabbing everything they could carry. Food, medicine, weapons. It was a treasure trove that could save countless human lives. The sound of energy weapons charging froze them in their tracks. Zoltar's voice rang out, dripping with malice. Did you really think you'd get away with this, human? Plasma bolts filled the air. Bobby's team dove for cover behind crates and equipment. Rocket returned fire, giving the others a chance to retreat with their precious cargo. Go! Rocket shouted. I'll hold them off! Bobby hesitated, torn between the mission and his friend. A plasma bolt grazed his shoulder, deciding for him. He grabbed a crate and ran. Zoltar's laughter echoed through the corridors. Your worlds will burn, human. Vega will crush the last of your pathetic resistance. Bobby's hand found the detonator in his pocket. He didn't look back as he triggered the explosives, collapsing the tunnels behind them. They found Rocket slumped against a wall, his chest a smoking ruin. Bobby and Zarn hauled him onto a makeshift stretcher as alarms blared throughout the facility. Leave me, Rocket gasped. Not a chance, Bobby growled. They stumbled towards the extraction point, stolen supplies in tow. The depot crumbled around them, steel beams groaning as explosions rocked the structure. A council freighter sat waiting on the landing pad. Bobby's team piled in, cramming every available space with their plundered goods. The engines roared to life, just as Zoltar's hunters burst onto the pad, their shots pinging harmlessly off the hull. Victory was theirs, but at a terrible cost. Rocket's breathing grew shallow as they raced back to human space. Bobby knew there was only one chance to save him. He seized control of a passing medical frigate, ignoring the protests of its crew. A tense standoff erupted as Earth's military command demanded he stand down. "We have wounded," Bobby shouted over the comm, "and supplies to break the blockade. Let us through, or I swear I'll ram this ship right through your defenses." The standoff dragged on for agonizing minutes before they were finally granted clearance. But it was too late for Rocket. He died in Bobby's arms as they touched down on Earth. The success of the raid brought a glimmer of hope to humanity's desperate struggle. But as Bobby stood over his friend's body, the weight of their losses threatened to crush him. How many more would die before this war was over? Across the stars, word of the daring raid spread like wildfire. In the shadow of the Council's iron fist, oppressed peoples looked to humanity with newfound admiration. The spark of rebellion, thought extinguished, began to flicker once more. Bobby's fist smashed into Zoltar's face, sending the alien reeling backward. Blood trickled from Zoltar's split lip as he stumbled, momentarily stunned. Bobby pressed his advantage, driving forward with a flurry of punches and kicks. Zoltar's superior strength allowed him to absorb the blows, but Bobby's fury gave him an edge. With a swift leg sweep, Bobby knocked Zoltar off balance. As the alien hit the ground, Bobby pounced, pinning him down. "It's over," Bobby snarled, raising his fist for a final blow. Zoltar's mandibles twitched in what passed for a denobulan smile. "Is it?" A deafening series of explosions rocked the camp. Bobby's head snapped up, watching in horror as fireballs erupted along the perimeter. Screams filled the air as panicked civilians fled the inferno. Taking advantage of Bobby's distraction, Zoltar activated his personal shield and shoved Bobby aside. Denobulan dropships swooped in, disgorging heavily armed troops that immediately laid down suppressing fire. "Fall back," Bobby shouted to his squad. "Evac the civilians. Move." Bobby sprinted through the chaos, barking orders as he went. "Jensen, take point! Ramirez, cover the rear! Everyone else, get these people to the transport ships!" Plasma bolts sizzled past Bobby's head as he herded terrified civilians toward the waiting shuttles. He fired back, his weapon set to maximum dispersal to buy precious seconds. "Come on, people, move it!" Bobby urged, practically shoving stragglers up the ramps. A young woman stumbled, her child wailing in her arms. Bobby scooped them both up, sprinting the last few meters to safety as enemy fire intensified. "That's it, we're at capacity," the pilot shouted. Bobby's heart sank as he realized how many were still trapped. "No, we can fit more." "Sir, we have to go now, or none of us make it out." With a pained growl, Bobby slapped the door control. The shuttle lifted off, leaving hundreds behind. Outside the city, Bobby's ragged group rendezvoused with rebel forces. He watched grimly as orbital bombardments lit up the sky, rebel ships engaging Vega's blockade in a desperate bid for freedom. Bobby addressed his battered team. "We've dealt them a blow, but it's not enough. Vega's still out there, and as long as he is, this war goes on. I'm going after him. Who's with me?" Grim nods answered him. They all knew the stakes. As Bobby prepared his strike team for the assault on Vega's flagship, he caught sight of Zoltar being rushed to a waiting ship. The Denobulan's eyes locked with Bobby's for a moment, promising future retribution. Bobby turned away, focusing on the task ahead. He knew some of them wouldn't return, but if taking out Vega could end this war, it would be worth the cost. "All right, people," Bobby said, checking his weapon. "Let's finish this." Bobby's team moved silently through the shadowy corridors of Vega's command ship. The acrid smell of ozone filled the air as they disabled security systems with precise efficiency. Bobby's heart pounded in his chest, each beat a reminder of the billions of lives hanging in the balance. "We're in," he whispered into his comm. "Alpha team, proceed to the weapons array. Beta team, with me to the bridge. They encountered the first wave of denobulin guards at a junction. Plasma bolts sizzled past Bobby's head as he dove for cover. His team responded with practiced coordination, laying down suppressing fire while flanking the enemy position. Bobby vaulted over a fallen guard, his boots leaving bloody footprints as he sprinted towards the bridge. The ship's alarms blared to life, drowning out the sounds of combat. Suddenly, a familiar figure stepped out from behind a bulkhead. Zoltar's mandibles clicked in anticipation, his energy weapon humming ominously. "We meet again, human," Zoltar sneered. "This time there will be no escape." Bobby didn't waste breath on a reply. He charged forward, ducking under Zoltar's first shot and tackling the alien to the ground. They grappled fiercely, rolling across the deck in a tangle of limbs. Zoltar's superior strength allowed him to pin Bobby momentarily, but the human's desperation lent him speed. Bobby headbutted Zoltar, stunning the alien long enough to break free. As they fought, Bobby's calm crackled to life. "Sir, we've reached the weapons array, but Vega was waiting for us. He's activated the firing sequence." Bobby's blood ran cold. He redoubled his efforts, raining blows on Zoltar with furious intensity. The alien staggered back, green blood oozing from a gash above his eye. A deafening rumble shook the ship as the first salvo of the orbital bombardment launched. Bobby could picture the destructive energy hurtling towards Earth, towards everything he had sworn to protect. With a roar of pure rage, Bobby unleashed a flurry of strikes. Zoltar, caught off guard by the human's ferocity, stumbled. Bobby seized the opportunity, landing a crushing blow to Zoltar's throat. The alien went down, gasping for air. Bobby stood over his fallen enemy, fist raised for a killing strike. But the comm chatter filled his ears, reports of devastation on Earth's surface, pleas for help from civilian populations. Time seemed to slow as Bobby faced his impossible choice: end Zoltar and deprive the enemy of a key leader, or abandon the fight and make a desperate sprint for the bridge, praying he could stop Vega before it was too late. The fate of humanity hung on his next move. Bobby's fist trembled as he lowered it, blood dripping from his knuckles. The choice tore at him, but Earth's screams echoed in his mind. He turned from Zoltar's prone form and sprinted down the corridor. "Come on, you bastard," Bobby muttered, glancing back. Zoltar scrambled to his feet, mandibles clicking furiously. He lunged after Bobby, driven by rage and the scent of human blood. Bobby led him on a twisting chase through the ship's bowels. His lungs burned as he pushed himself to the limit, always staying just out of Zoltar's reach. He skidded around a corner and found what he was looking for: the reactor room's heavy blast door. He slammed his palm on the access panel. The door hissed open, revealing a cavernous chamber dominated by a pulsing antimatter core. Bobby dove inside, Zoltar hot on his heels. "Nowhere left to run, human," Zoltar snarled, advancing slowly. Bobby backed up against a control console. "Who's running?" His fingers flew across the keypad, initiating an emergency overload sequence. Alarms blared as the reactor's containment field began to destabilize. Zoltar's compound eyes widened in realization. He spun and bolted for the door, but Bobby tackled him from behind. They grappled on the metal grating as the reactor core pulsed faster and brighter. "If I die, I'm taking you with me," Bobby growled. He drove his knee into Zoltar's thorax, stunning the alien. Bobby scrambled to his feet and sprinted for the exit. The blast door was already sliding shut as fail-safes engaged. Bobby dove, tumbling through the narrowing gap. He rolled to his feet and ran as fast as his battered body would allow. Behind him, Zoltar's agonized screech was cut short by a deafening roar. White-hot energy engulfed the corridor. Bobby felt the heat on his back as he rounded a corner, the shockwave lifting him off his feet. He slammed into a bulkhead, vision blurring. When the ringing in his ears subsided, Bobby pushed himself up on shaking arms. Zoltar was gone, atomized in the reactor breach. But as Bobby limped to a viewport, his heart sank. Fiery contrails streaked Earth's atmosphere. Massive explosions bloomed across the surface, scouring entire cities from existence. Bobby's fists clenched as he watched his homeworld burn. A cruel laugh drew his attention to a nearby monitor. Vega's smug face filled the screen as he surveyed the destruction from his command ship. "Glorious, isn't it?" the Denobulan leader sneered. "And this is only the beginning. Prepare the second wave." Vega's words cut off as alarms blared. Bobby's gaze snapped to the viewport. A battered human interceptor tore through the debris field, engines blazing as it accelerated toward Vega's vessel. Bobby's eyes widened as he recognized the suicide run. The interceptor plowed through defensive fire, trailing flames and debris. It slammed into Vega's ship at full speed, punching through the weakened hull. The resulting explosion tore through the command vessel. Bobby braced himself as the shockwave rattled his section of the ship. When he looked again, the bridge of Vega's ship was a gaping wound venting atmosphere. Bobby pushed off from the wall, gritting his teeth against the pain. He had to reach Vega before the coward could escape. Bobby forced his battered body forward, leaving a trail of blood droplets in the zero-G environment. He emerged into the ruined bridge, surrounded by sparking consoles and drifting debris. A movement caught his eye. Vega, clawing desperately at a tear in his pressure suit. The Denobulan's eyes bulged as he gasped for breath. Bobby propelled himself forward, colliding with Vega. They tumbled through the wreckage, trading blows. Vega's strikes grew weaker as oxygen deprivation took its toll. With a final surge of strength, Bobby pinned Vega against a twisted bulkhead. He grabbed a length of severed cable and wrapped it around the alien, securing him in place. "Watch," Bobby snarled, gesturing to the viewport. "Watch as your grand plan falls apart." Vega struggled weakly, his curses turning to wheezes. Bobby watched dispassionately as the Denobulan's movements slowed, then stopped altogether. Pushing off from Vega's lifeless form, Bobby made his way to an intact console. He keyed in an emergency broadcast, hailing any human ship still fighting. "This is Bobby Jones," he said, voice raw. "Vega is dead. I repeat, Supreme Leader Vega is dead." He panned the camera to show Vega's body. "The Denobulans speak of bringing order, but do so through oppression and terror. Well, we humans have brought order of another kind." Bobby's words echoed across space, reaching beleaguered human forces and oppressed colonies alike. As reports of Vega's death spread, the first sparks of rebellion ignited. Bobby's fingers trembled as he keyed in the final commands on the battered console. The broadcast signal pulsed outward, carrying his voice across the stars. "This is Bobby Jones. Supreme Leader Vega is dead. I repeat, Vega is dead." He panned the camera to show Vega's lifeless body, drifting in the zero-G environment of the ruined bridge. "The Denobulans speak of order, but they bring only oppression. We humans have shown them a different kind of order, one born of freedom and defiance." As Bobby's words echoed through comm channels, the response was immediate and explosive. Reports flooded in from a dozen worlds, streets filled with cheering crowds, Denobulan outposts overrun by emboldened rebels, statues of Vega toppling in city squares. A battered rebel cruiser docked with the remains of Vega's command ship. Bobby stumbled onto the bridge, his uniform caked with dried blood. The rebel captain snapped a salute. "Supreme Commander Jones, sir. We're here to bring you home." Bobby blinked, taken aback. "Supreme Commander?" "The colonial forces have rallied behind you, sir. You're the leader of the insurrection now." As they limped back toward Earth, Bobby watched the revolution unfold on vidscreens. He should have felt elated, but a cold dread settled in his gut. The Denobulan war machine was vast, and this victory would only enrage them further. Earth loomed before them, a charred husk of its former self. Firestorms still raged across continents, visible even from orbit. Bobby's heart clenched at the sight. They landed in the ruins of what had once been Singapore. A crowd of haggard survivors gathered, cheering as Bobby emerged from the ship. Their faces were gaunt, clothes tattered, but hope burned in their eyes. Bobby raised a hand in acknowledgement, fighting to keep his expression neutral as he surveyed the devastation. The stench of smoke and death filled his nostrils. In the distance, a pillar of ash rose from a mass grave. A somber ceremony was hastily assembled. Leaders of the resistance gathered in the burned-out shell of a government building. Candles flickered, casting long shadows as they honored the countless dead. "We've struck a mighty blow," General Hawkins said, his voice hoarse. "But the Denobulans will retaliate with everything they have. We need to evacuate, regroup on the outer colonies." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Bobby stood, silencing them with a raised hand. "No," he said firmly. "We make our stand here on Earth." Protests erupted immediately. Bobby waited for them to subside before continuing. "This is our home, our birthright. If we run now, we'll always be running. We draw them in, bleed them dry on our own turf." He turned to the window, gazing out at the ruined skyline. "We build our defenses here, in the ashes of our cities. We'll make every street a killing ground, every building a fortress." Silence fell as the implications sank in. Finally, a grizzled colonel spoke up. "It's suicide, sir." Bobby nodded grimly. "Maybe, but it's our best chance to break them for good." In the weeks that followed, Bobby threw himself into the preparations. He worked alongside the survivors, hauling rubble and welding makeshift barricades. The remnants of humanity's cities were transformed into sprawling fortresses. Months passed in a blur of endless labor. Bobby stood atop a watchtower, surveying their handiwork. A vast network of trenches and fortifications stretched as far as the eye could see. A lieutenant approached, her face ashen. "Sir, long-range sensors have picked up the Denobulan fleet. Over 1,000 capital ships, millions of troops." Bobby nodded, his expression resolute. He keyed his comm, broadcasting to all defenders. "This is it, people. The moment we've been waiting for. Let them come. We've already sacrificed everything for our freedom. What's one more battle?" As the first Denobulan ships breached the atmosphere, Bobby hefted his rifle. The opening salvos of the final battle for Earth were about to begin.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.